So what is the Because Maybe podcast? I know you're all dying to know why you're probably going to be wasting the next hour of your time listening to. Right now, there is a glut of 90s nostalgia. I'm as guilty of it as anybody else is. The thing is, when you see it, it's usually memes and BuzzFeed lists, and it's written by someone who's maybe in their mid-20s, who wouldn't have really experienced that much of the 90s and 90s culture. They may have caught the tail end of it, fine, whatever, but not so much people who lived it. You know, and that's not a criticism to anybody. You know, I'm trying to be lighthearted, and I'm trying to keep everybody engaged as possible. So please don't think that as a criticism. But I read some of these lists, and I don't identify it with any of it. A lot of it is, you know, hey, look at this TV show. Wasn't it great now? And then comparing it to some TV show that's not as good. Or cartoon. Or, you know, just something small and saying, man, one thing's great in the old days. And yes, they were. But not in the way that people might think. The 90s was a different time to what things are now. You know, the 90s, there's a lot of things that happen, not just in the pop culture world, but in the world as a whole. And that's one of the things I want to look at. I want to look at all aspects of the 90s, to document it, to go through, you know, I'm going to try and keep it as lighthearted as possible, like I mentioned. I want to keep this entertaining. I'm trying not to go as too dark as possible. But, you know, there are some things that we've changed as a society during the 90s in a speed that we hadn't done in any other decade before. You know, for example, at the beginning of the 90s, the idea that everybody who owned a computer could connect to each other and share information, share files, communicate, that was a pie-in-the-sky dream. That was unheard of. Nobody had ever thought of doing that. CDs that would play music is one thing, but having a DVD that would play movies on your I mean, it just, that kind of thing, you know, that sounds inconsequential. Then we had music movements, political movements. We had things like grunge come out of the woodwork. We had this big rush of British pop culture from the mid to late 90s. We had this big glut of girl power. We had independent movies becoming the norm, independent music becoming what was listened to. The alternative scene became the mainstream. We had countries basically disintegrate under your very eyes. We had hip political leaders, whether you like what they are now or hate what they are now, and it was just a very, very different time. Everybody was more loose, and everybody was more accepting of a lot of things. Now, there were some things that we were still in the dark ages on, don't get me wrong, but at least for that period of time, it was a different way of looking at things. It was different from our parents, which is every generation. But we are the generation that, you know, you hear it all. We were the last to play outside and the first to get the smartphones. But not just that. We were the last people to understand why both of those things are important.